I'm Rene Ritchie, and this is Vector. And this is HomePod. Now, I'm not going to do a review right now because HomePod is technically not available in the country where I live. But I put my analyst hat on, went down to Cupertino, got to talk to Apple, I got to try the HomePod both in the US and here at home, and put together some thoughts about where HomePod fits into the Apple ecosystem and potentially into our lives. So the HomePod project began about 6 years ago at Apple, and they really wanted to see if they could make a speaker that you could put anywhere in your house and would be super easy to set up and would sound great no matter where you put it. Now, those sorts of things are really easy to say, but it takes an incredible amount of hardware and software engineering to realize them. So ultimately, the solution they came up with is HomePod. It doesn't look like traditional speakers. It's not big metal on a stand. It doesn't look like a hot rod or a rocket ship. It doesn't look like traditional smart speakers either, which have been like shoe boxes or scratching posts for cats or maybe air fresheners. It looks utterly Apple, almost like a 2013 Mac Pro or like an iPod spun 360 degrees. But it's not finished in bead-blasted aluminum. It's not finished in high-gloss plastic. It has this acoustically transparent cloth weave that covers the entire product except for the very bottom that has this non-stick coating, which kind of does stick to lint, and the Apple logo. And then the top, which has the controls, the touchscreen for Hey Siri. And that's all it really is. That and a cord that I really like because the cord is sort of cloth like the enclosure, and if it proves more durable than the lightning cords or MagSafe, whatever USB cords they have now, which sort of strip and break on me all the time, then I really hope Apple switches to these for all their products. Setup is ridiculously easy. It works just like AirPods. Tap the setup button, pick where you're going to put it. I think this time I'll go for living room, hit continue. Personal requests, you've got to decide. Do you want people to have access to your messages, your reminders, your notes whenever you're at home and your setup device is on the network, or would you rather not? You can choose whether you want convenience or privacy, or you can change your mind later on in settings. I'm going to do OK for now and agree, and it's going to transfer my settings. So that tone that you heard is sort of how HomePod identifies itself. It's like the pattern on an Apple Watch or the numbers that you type in from an Apple TV. Just make sure that you pair the right HomePod with the right device. Type in my password, no peeking.
Hi, I'm Siri. Welcome to HomePod. You can't tell, but I'm waving. To get my attention, say, "Hey Siri, let's try it." Say, "Hey Siri, what can you do?"
Hey Siri, what can you do?
I can do lots of things, like turn on the lights, give you a news update, and tell you about the weather. Now you try. Say, "Hey Siri, play some music."
Hey Siri, play Vector with Rene Ritchie.
Okay, Vector with Rene Ritchie podcast coming up.
Hey Siri, stop. I'm Rene Ritchie. So I've set it up about 10 or 12 times now. Once it went super fast, a couple times it took about a minute. Once it failed, I had to start again. But all in all, it really is quick and easy to set up. So Apple was a computer company, then Apple was a camera company, and now Apple is a speaker company. And that probably surprises a lot of people, but it shouldn't. Apple takes its expertise, its deep knowledge of computers, and turns other devices into computers. Sure, the iPhone is a phone, but it's just as much a camera. And now the iPad has got tremendous 4 speakers that maintain stereo pairing no matter which way you turn them. iPhone has stereo speakers. The iMac, the MacBook Pro, all of them have phenomenal speakers. Apple's been building up a deep, deep talent pool for like the last 5 years, the last 6 years or so. And we saw that in AirPods, which are ridiculously clever, and now we're seeing them in HomePod, which is not just clever, but sounds really, really good. And I think that's key to understanding how Apple approaches new products and how they're going to approach what comes next. So I got a chance to visit Apple's audio lab in Cupertino, and this lab, I'll show you some of the pictures here. The lab it's a bit bonkers. It is a giant facility that has these really big acoustical rooms. For example, there's a room that's on these balance beams so that it's completely separate from the rest of the building. It doesn't get any vibrations from it, and it's got a mesh floor that you should not use as a trampoline. You get yelled at for doing that, FYI pro tip. They also have places that isolate vibration, that isolate sound. that lets you reduce the noise level to like minus 2 decibels, which is unnaturally quiet. It doesn't feel normal to be in a room like that. And it's what let Apple develop the 7 tweeters that form the array here, the 6 beamforming microphones, the high excursion woofer, and the AA chipset, the chipset from the iPhone 6 and the Apple TV 4 that does all the computing, that lets Apple take the atoms and achieve far more than the atoms alone would be able to achieve. It does real-time modeling for the woofer, faster than real-time buffering for streaming, direct and ambient audio mixing, beamforming, machine learning, all the buzzwords. It does echo cancellation and the ability to analyze and place center vocals in the middle of the room while still having ambient reverb, backup vocals, the left-right channel data to fill out the rest of the room. And it's even got an accelerometer, so if I pick it up and I move it to this side, it will readjust itself to the room. And the way it does that is really cool. There's no like true play or putting a microphone in the sweet spot and doing all this setup stuff, waiting for all these noises. It just listens to how the music moves through the room, how it echoes, how it reverbs, everything about the room. And in a few seconds, while playing that first song that it prompted you to play during setup, it handles the entire acoustical modeling of the room. And then when you move it, it just takes a few more seconds and it readjusts and boom, you're good to go. It really couldn't be any more simple. And if I sound excited about it, it's because I really am. This, I think, is the next step towards taking all of these devices beyond just what the physical hardware alone can do. And that is legitimately exciting. I am not an audiophile, and that was one of my big questions. Would I be able to hear the difference? Would it matter to me? Would it make any difference? And the answer is absolutely yes. I've had Sonos for about 5 years now, the Sonos home theater systems. I have several of the speakers, and I like them. They always sounded great to me, and I was quasi-nervous that I didn't want HomePod to sound too good because I spent a lot of money on Sonos, but immediately I could hear that it sounds audibly better. The only analogy I can give is like when I was fine with my iPhone 3G screen, and then I saw the Retina display on the iPhone 4. I was fine with my Apple TV, and then I saw HDR on an LG C7P TV, and you can't go back from that. And this is similar. Just compared to Sonos, which I still think sounds really good, HomePod sounds audibly better. And I'm not even going to bother comparing it to the Amazon Echo or the Google Home Max because those really aren't in the same league as Sonos or a HomePod. But if you're worried about whether you'll be able to hear the difference, you absolutely can. Now, this is deeply tied into Apple Music, Apple Podcasts, iTunes Music, iTunes Match, and the AirPlay ecosystem. And that's not everything, and that's legitimately frustrating to some people who listen to Spotify or people who use Amazon Music or anything like that. And some will call it a lock-in, but I don't think it's actually a lock-in. I think the same way Apple TV is open to Amazon Prime Video now, finally, at last, and Netflix and all these other services, and the way AirPod can stream over Bluetooth and not AirPlay, I think Apple just made what it thought was the best decision for this product at launch to get version 1 out the door. And Apple Music and iTunes is something that Apple controls completely, has access to completely, and has deep knowledge of. So it could tune everything from the way the files work to the way they stream to the metadata, to every bit about it, to the Siri domains and intents, and make sure that it sounded great at launch. And also you can't sort of go and test it at Bluetooth and say, oh, it sounds the same as the rest because Bluetooth doesn't sound very good. You have to sort of listen to it under Apple's terms, and they wanted to make sure it sounded as good as possible. I should pause and point out that AirPlay 2, which was announced as one of the major features for HomePod back when HomePod was unveiled for the first time, hasn't shipped yet. It's shown up in beta, it's come out of beta, it's back in beta, but Apple says it'll be coming later this year. And what AirPlay 2 does is allow for multi-device and multi-room functionality. For example, you'll be able to pair 2 HomePods in your living room to have even deeper, richer sound in an even larger environment. You'll be able to put 2 of them in your living room and 1 of them in your kitchen and 1 of them in your bedroom and control exactly what music is playing to each one of those, be it the same song to all of them or different songs in different rooms. And it'll work with other AirPlay 2 devices if Sonos ever actually rolls out AirPlay support or third-party AirPlay 2 speakers. It'll just be a much more functional device. So that is coming later in the year. I'm only testing it with AirPlay 1 right now. HomePod and Apple TV. So HomePod, there's no dedicated soundbar mode. You can't just pair it and forget it with an Apple TV if that's what you want to do, if you want to make HomePod your home theater. But it does work with AirPlay, and Apple TV does stream AirPlay out. So in your Apple TV interface, it's just really easy to go and pick your HomePod as your audio interface, and it's sticky. It'll stay that way until something major changes, like it's rebooted, or you AirPlay something else, or you sort of take over the stream with a different sound source. If you have no home theater system, or you have just a crappy TV speakers, you'll notice an immediate difference with HomePod. But it really isn't a dedicated soundbar. There aren't dedicated surround speakers. There isn't a big subwoofer the way you can get with Sonos or with home theaters in a box, and you will notice a difference. I think when the AirPlay 2 is out and you have 2 HomePods, I think it'll likely sound better than the Sonos theater that I have right now, except maybe for that big booming bass. But Apple went out of its way to eliminate sort of disturbing or shaking or moving things off the table because they didn't want HomePod to shake itself off the table. It's really small. But I think if that's what you want, if you live in a condo or apartment, or you just don't want that heavy thudding sound, I think you'll be perfectly fine with HomePod as a home theater. I've been using HomeKit since it was first released, primarily with light bulbs, but when I moved, I used it as an excuse to sort of go all in on HomeKit, and now I have locks and fans and plugs and sensors and all these different things. And HomePod, not surprisingly, works really, really well with them because you have ambient Siri. You just have Siri out there. You don't even have, and I can't believe how lazy I sound, you don't even have to turn your wrist to hit the trigger words. You don't have to pull the iPhone from your pocket. You don't have to shout over to reach your iPad. You just say the command words. And even if music is playing, you can just say the command words and it'll hear you. If the music is really loud, you might have to be a little bit louder than normal. If people are cross-chatting, if you say the trigger word and then people start talking, you might have to wait till they've finished. But in almost every case, it's just heard me immediately and acted quickly to do whatever I've asked. There are a couple limitations. So for example, hey Siri, lock the front door.
Your door is locked.
So that works. Secure devices work with the locking function, but watch this. Hey Siri, unlock the front door. In that case, my iPod took over because the HomePod can't unlock secure accessories. And that's to prevent someone from sticking their head in the door and just yelling, yo Jimbo, unlock, while their friend runs in for a home invasion. It really is security first. And what you saw there also is how you deal with multiple Siri devices. And this has worked since there have been iPhones and iPads. So basically, immediately, as soon as you say the trigger word, every Siri device that hears you wakes up and starts to process your request. And then they start to vote on which one should actually answer. They don't wait to figure that out first because it would introduce a lot of delay and a lot of latency, and that's not what you want. You want to pick the best device to handle the request based on what each of those devices can do. HomePod, like Apple TV, works as a hub, and that means that if you have a really big area and you have accessories all over the place and they're almost out of Bluetooth range, wherever you have your HomePod, just like wherever you have your Apple TV, that resets the range. It just extends how far your accessories can reach. So if there's any knock against Siri, it's that Apple was first out the gate with a mainstream voice-controlled, artificially intelligent personal assistant, and then they sort of dropped the ball and they let Amazon ramp up with Alexa, and they let Google ramp up first with Google Now and then Google Assistant. And when you look, not maybe how fast they spread regionally, because outside the US is very different than inside the US. This amount of integrations they handled and their ability to get beamforming microphones into the house very fast gave people the impression that they were much more solid than Siri, and that's absolutely fair. But with HomePod, Apple's doing a bit of a reset. They put a lot of work into making Siri incredibly functional. It has those beamforming microphones so it can hear you, and it has deep, deep knowledge of music, so you can ask all sorts of things like who made this song, what are the nominated or award-winning songs, play more from this album. But more importantly to me is that it's starting to take the next step in terms of digital assistants. When I say play Public Enemy, I don't want the assistant to just get better at knowing how I pronounce the word Public Enemy. I want to start to understand that I like Public Enemy and to recommend that more often or play that more often or find stuff that's like that to sort of round out my music taste with. And that's what Apple is delivering with HomePod. They call it musicology. It's really sort of like really smart DJing. And it is the next step in assistants on their way to sort of becoming prescient, to sort of knowing what we want before we want it. And it's an important next step. But in terms of day-to-day stuff, asking HomePod to do things in the kitchen, whether it's setting timers or converting measurement units, or it's in the living room and it's working as a theater, because you can still play and pause AirPlay streams without issue. And you can ask questions. You can ask what the weather is while you're watching something, and it just stops it for a second, keeps going. Or in the bedroom when I play a podcast or music, or ask when sunrise is going to be. All that stuff has been working great so far. And it sort of feels like we're on that next step towards getting to where Her is, where I have my iPhone and my iPad and my Apple TV and my HomePod, and they sort of make a mesh Siri assistant that sort of lives ubiquitously, ambiently around me and is greater than the sum of the parts. And it's all, driven by Siri OS. That's what I'm really looking forward to. I don't want an Amazon microphone or a Google microphone in my house. I don't want a company that makes us money off analyzing my behavior or harvesting my data to get access to my conversations and my activities. And you can call me any name you want because of that, but it doesn't seem like a fair trade for me. I don't think free services are anywhere nearly as valuable as all the data I'm giving up, the data that makes their businesses. I want them to share the wealth if they want me to share the data. And that's why I'm glad Apple is entering this market, because I value the security and the privacy that they provide. And that includes everything being processed locally on HomePod before you say those trigger words. And then once you say them, Apple assigns you a tokenized ID. It's totally anonymous, encrypts it end to end, and transmits it that way to their servers. And because they don't need your data, they don't monetize your data, they don't want to hold on to your data, that's where their interest ends. But you can even take it a step further. You can actually say, "Hey Siri, stop listening."
I can turn off Hey Siri, but if I do, you'll need to press the top of the device to get my attention. Is this what you want?
Yes.
Okay, I've turned off Hey Siri.
And now it's a dead mic. You can have a few moments of privacy. You can have conversations, meetings, and when you want it to come back on, "Hey Siri, start listening."
Okay, I've turned on Hey Siri.
You also have a bunch of other settings in the Home app. Right here in the Add Home button, which confusingly looks like an arrow, it comes up and I have my profile here. I can tap on that and I can choose to turn off or on personal requests. I can turn that on again if I want to. I can choose for secure requests or never. I can also go down here and do software updates when they're available, but also choose who I want to have access to AirPlay. So for example, anyone on the same network, that's anyone I've given my Wi-Fi password to, or only people who I've shared this home with in HomeKit. I can even require a password. I can turn that off or on and edit the password so that people who want to AirPlay have to put in that password, and Jim Dalrymple can't just drive by my house and start AirPlaying Ozzy Osbourne at all hours of the morning and night. There are also settings for accessibility. Apple has been shipping all of its new devices with accessibility built right in. It's not wait and see, it's not we'll do it if we have time. It's that it's really important and they want to make sure that it's there right away from the start. And I can go into accessibility and I can go into voiceover and I can change the speaking rate, the double tap timeout, the audio ducking. I can go into touch accommodations and I can turn them on. I can do hold duration for the buttons, ignore repeat touches for the buttons. I can have tap assistant for initial touch location and final touch location. And it's just a great way to make HomePod a device that is really meant to be easy for everyone to use, and this makes sure that it's easy for everyone to use. The original iPod was limited, the original iPhone was limited, iPad, Apple Watch, Apple TV, all of those were really limited products, but they were really interesting products. When you saw pinch to zoom, or you saw the Apple TV putting your iTunes library on your television, or you started to fill the rings on the Apple Watch, they were compelling. And even though it was just the beginning, you wanted to be part of it. And that's sort of what I feel like with HomePod. Yes, it's the first version, and yes, Apple typically iterates really quickly, and the hardware is so solid that there's a lot of room for software iteration already, but I want to be part of that. I want to be part of computational audio. I want to be part of ambient Siri. I want to see where Apple is taking both audio technology and assistant technology. You know, in one day, like I said, this might be the hub for Siri OS, just like in the movie Her, and it'll define the way that we have interactive computing experiences at home, much like AirPods and their successors will do when we're on the go. But right now, it's like Retina for my ears, or portrait mode for music. It shows what's possible when the bits start to stand on the shoulders of the atoms and just let them raise higher. It's the start of another revolution in personal technology, and seriously, computerize all the things at this point. And it's certainly not perfect, not yet. There are severe limits in the services it integrates with and the assistance that it provides, so much so that HomePod will really only appeal to customers who are already deeply enmeshed in Apple's ecosystem. But for those customers, I mean, there are reports that Apple Music is going to pass Spotify soon in terms of US usage. So there's a lot of people who are already using iPhones, iPads, Apple Music, and all the services Apple provides. And for those people, this absolutely nails what Apple set out to do. It is a speaker that can be placed anywhere, that is super easy to set up, and that sounds great no matter where you put it. And if that is something that you like, HomePod will be something that you like. Hey YouTube, I'm Rene Ritchie. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please do me a favor, subscribe to the channel, and that way you'll be able to restore peace and justice to the galaxy far, far away.